Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom.
Welcome to Emotional Algebra with Dr. E. Emotional Algebra is a podcast that helps listeners to understand the subtle calculations people make every day in their relationships with others. It's a podcast to help us all become better people through understanding the different variables that drive our behaviors. I'm your co-host, Andrew Tavani.
And I'm Dr. E.
Dr. E, you are looking refreshed. You almost look like you have a summer tan. I don't know. Were you somewhere, maybe on vacation?
Yeah, we took a little vacation down to Cabo. It's one of our favorite places to go. I always call it desert on the ocean. So it's nice. It's often dry and sunny. Love the people there. And we really enjoyed a lot. So we've been going there for a number of years. And that's kind of our home away from home.
That's great. So you got plenty of vitamin D. You are refreshed, I assume.
Absolutely.
Ready to jump in. And so you had a nice vacation?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Just my wife and I, our daughter, with her being in college, she now has her life going on and things. So my wife and I got a little bit of that rest, relaxation, and reconnection, with our lives at home and getting caught up in work and other things in life. It's always nice to get that time away and reacquaint with my best friend.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. You're just coming off vacation because we are doing today's episode is going to be a little based on the news, some stuff that's been going on in the news, and it has to do with vacationers traveling and tourism and so forth, which we thought was interesting. You and I both saw this and thought it would be a good topic even before you went on vacation. Now, hopefully you didn't encounter any of this when you were on vacation, but
no.
One thing that's been happening earlier in June in Spain and in Italy and in a couple of, I think Portugal as well, a couple of European countries, but I think most of it was happening in Spain. Locals there were protesting against what they were saying is over tourism. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways they were protesting was by taking water pistols and shooting water at all the travelers who were over there. Many of them Americans. I think they were actually targeting Americans.
Yeah. One, I think we want to look at that as tourists, this to me is the emotional algebra part is, as tourists, how do we behave and respond? And, I think Americans sometimes get a bad rap and sometimes it's fair depending on how certain people respond. I know that, when I travel to places, I try to make sure I'm respectful of the culture. I know that when I'm in France, I speak French. So I work to speak French. And even in Cabo, I'll work to speak a little bit of Spanish. And people often enjoy that. So I think we have to look at our attitudes of entitlement that we enter into travel. And one of the things also, Andrew, that sparked this was the Bezos wedding in Venice and how it kind of took over the whole city and then other people's issues with that.
And there was a fair amount of opposition to that from locals, and that was in Venice, Italy. Mm-hmm. There were activists. I know that Greenpeace protested, but there were more just everyday folks joining in on it as well.
Right, which brought in more tourists, or more people at least traveling there, whether you can call them tourists or not. But there was definitely a lot of travel there that kind of clogged and bogged down the city a bit, it seemed like.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's sort of a complicated issue too, right? I guess there's a lot to talk about here about the emotions that the protesters are feeling, the locals, and then the emotions being felt by the people who are just trying to go on vacation and getting shot at with water guns and whatnot. But maybe we should why don't we take a look at some of what was happening in Spain and then actually hear from a few people. We've got a little bit of news footage here. So let's quickly take a look at that. So yeah, there you go. There's tourists getting chased away. And then
city anymore. It can't take anymore. Neither the water resources nor the public transport, which is overcrowded 12 months of the year.
Rents are still rising. The city is still overcrowded. They are taking us out of our neighborhoods. They are taking us out of our historic center.
I think that right now mass tourism brings poverty because the wages we are paid are not enough for us to live. A big chunk of prices, both of rent and consumption in general here in Barcelona, are determined by tourist demand rather than people's economic possibilities.
okay, so they have several gripes, Dr. E.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's some local economy issues from the last gentleman we heard from there.
Right.
Also, just being, it seems, crowded out of their places.
Yeah, I know I can speak from having been going to Cabo for almost 20 years, how it's changed. And, people travel to places, they fall in love with them. They want to maybe build something there, or they come every year, and then more people want to come and they tell people. And, that's part of, we have to look at kind of that idea of building economy for people and the politicians. It's great to bring in outside dollars. It's great to bring in that investment. And even from that, beyond tourism, when people move to those areas, it potentially brings in higher income people that then are employing some of the people who might not have jobs, or people who can make more of a living or a better living. While, I think the disparity between what the prices become because of, in some ways, supply and demand and economic factors, and what people who live there can afford, does create greater disparity, I believe. So I definitely see that person's point, as well as then it attracts a number of people from other areas of that country who now want jobs. And if they can't find jobs, then what's the effect on that local economy? And then what's the effect on that culture and the connection between people? So it kind of in some ways is becoming a get off my lawn kind of thing, I think justifiably so. We have places we want to live. And I know in looking at an article on what they're doing in Japan, there was a place where everybody was taking selfies of themselves at Mount Fuji.
Yeah.
So they put a big billboard or a big block between
There's a wall.
that area.
They built a huge wall to block the view.
Yeah. So I mean, they're doing things to try to deal with this influx. And I think in that level, we have to look at as tourists. Again, are we respecting the people who live there, the people who it's their home? And, or like I said, do we have a sense of entitlement that, well, I'm visiting here, I'm bringing you income, you should want to wait on me and serve me? Equity says no. Equity says wherever I go, do unto others as I would have them do unto me. And hierarchy says, hey, if I have the gold, I make the rules. And that just, to me, it's not the way it's supposed to be. Yeah.
And I mean, some of these people too sound like they have very practical concerns. Public transportation is getting overcrowded. Everywhere they go, it's a strain on basically the local resources and whatnot. I can certainly understand how that would be distressing for some people.
And just exhausting after a while, just because how much time how much extra time does it take to commute to a job? How many extra people do you have to deal with? And that like you said, they don't speak your language, you can't speak theirs. There's communication issues. There's an influx of people coming in and coming out. There's potentially family stressors or influences now that your kids are being exposed to, that you might have moved to some of these areas that are now becoming higher tourism areas because you liked the quaint nature of that. And when people are so often feeling overwhelmed in their cities or their communities, and they're able to afford travel to get away, and more people are doing that, guess what? Their problem is now being inflicted on other people who really chose to move to those smaller areas. I know that there's some towns in the mainland of Mexico where there's a lot of expats there. And even that town's becoming overcrowded when people move there to get away from all the craziness of the States and to find a small Mexican town with friendly people. And it's becoming a bit overloaded. And then you get these bigger houses being built that then, again, economic issues. Well, now we can charge more because people can pay more. And now we have this issue. Now we have taxes that we're because we have to add to infrastructure and because we're trying to bring tourists in. So I think these are really big discussions to have with the cities in the people and the politicians, and to really set plans in motion so that there is a plan. Failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah. And so much of that, I think a lot of these places build themselves and try to attract tourism. They're actually trying to attract tourism. So it's interesting. Some of the problem maybe that these folks have is really with their elected leaders rather than the people who are just showing up there because these places are billed as great.
Right. And who are the they? Yeah, that's the question, is who are the they that are trying to attract tourists? And I think that's a key discussion to have, even in the United States. I know that when we moved to our town, it was a small town, and then 7 years later we moved a little bit further out, and now that's getting consumed by urban sprawl, and we have a lot of the chains coming in and filling that. We got the biggest mall in Georgia that was built years ago. And it's part about opportunity, it's about growth, and then, like I said, what's the effect, the long-term effect on community, traffic, stress, all these things that we're trying to help people to manage. So I think the things we want to look at are how we look at control, and how we manage those emotions that we have in these situations, whether it's our home or whether we're traveling, in our commute daily. These are all issues we want to look at, is how we manage those situations.
Speaking of managing situations, Dr. E, what do you think about the tactic of using the water guns as a form of protest?
I think it's a kind of a civil disobedience. It's letting people know, hey, you're in my space. I think they're wanting to get a message across. I think depending on how that person responds who's getting squirted, it's a way to say, like I said, you're in my space, be aware. And if you're affecting me, I'm going to affect you. And I think we want to look at, like I said, learning about mutual respect, learning how to, as we say in the opening of the show, how we can be and behave like better people to support each other, whether it's making sure you pick up your litter, making sure that you treat people respectfully, making sure that you're aware of where you're taking pictures, when you're taking pictures, making sure you're aware of the noise you're making sure especially you're aware of cultural issues. I know so many times tourists, no matter what the country, step all over the cultural issues of the people that live there, yet they want their cultural issues. I know when we were in Greece, I guess it was a couple years ago now, we were on a cruise, and the different people just rushing in front and just pushing in front to get on the tour bus. And I was just in shock about some of these cultures of people that they justify their actions based in part maybe on their history. Whereas if you're on vacation and I'm on vacation and we're on vacation, it can really be an enjoyable experience. So be mindful, be aware, feel what you're feeling, and be more in a Zen space. Be excellent to each other, as Bill and Ted said.
Look at that. Now, I was looking at it, and it seems like the water gun strategy almost like walks up to the line of being inappropriate, but falls just short of it, because it is kind of harmless. They're just shooting water, like it's just a little bit of water on somebody. Yeah, it's a bit of a nuisance, but it really doesn't go beyond that. But I'm wondering too, what do you think about the decision to do that? Who's, from an emotional perspective of the locals who are doing this, are they who are they trying to send the message to? Are they trying to send the message to the people sitting there? Like you saw some people sitting down having a drink, and then they had to get up because they were just getting bombarded with water, or are they trying to make an example of it more to get the local leaders' attention so that they
I think it's and more, because then you got to realize this is now going on social media. This is really, I hope, the positive effects of all these discussions on over tourism have really brought attention to people who will be traveling, how to really be mindful and aware of where they're traveling to, and to behave respectfully. Don't go in there with an attitude that You know, right? I would ask people not to go in there in an attitude that is more combative and don't spray me, but seeing that again, you're affecting other people's lives. And in this, to me, that line that they're getting to is the most polite, least politeful way to let people know, hey, you're in my space. So what are they feeling? Frustrated, helpless, overwhelmed, maybe fearful of what they're potentially losing in their day-to-day life. I would feel a bit fearful of that and overwhelmed, and I'd feel confused as to how do I manage this situation? What's the best way? I can't necessarily just speak and tell people to go home because they might not understand my language, you know, but I can spray them with something. And that to me is a universal language of getting sprayed with water to say, hey, back off. You know, that's annoyance, that's irritation. And that's getting to the point of kind of like a mild anger that you almost could say sarcasm. Because remember, sarcasm is that humor that says, if you hear what I'm saying, back off. And if you take it the wrong way, can't you take a joke? So there is that element to it because they can say, hey, I've got a message here to back off and to kind of stay out of my territory. And then if they say, well, it was just water. Now it's not paint, it's not dye, it's not, you know, what Pete has tended to do. It's just saying, hey, be mindful.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. I hadn't thought about that. So it's more the message for the people who have yet to come there. Maybe their vacation's in a few weeks. They see this on social media, and hopefully, I guess in the folks who are doing it, in their mind, you know, these people mind their manners a little bit while they're there, at least.
And even when we talked, remember we did an episode last year, first season, about travel when I went to Japan and all the pictures and all the selfies. Yes. And then you had that article of the selfie of the selfie of the selfie, you know, and the people getting those perfect shots on the beach. That is one of the most, to me, disruptive behaviors that I have seen traveling. Is people will just stop without awareness of who's walking around them, behind them. They'll want to get the perfect shot. They'll take 10, 15, 20 pictures. They're asking other people to take pictures. And that, you know, you talked about that issue in Japan with Mount Fuji. Like I said, in Japan, in Osaka, you know, where they had that runner coming through and the sides of the building are painted. And the one business took advantage of it by having the place to take the picture. Well, outside of that area in the sidewalk, all in front of that business, there were still people disrupting people's walking patterns through the sidewalks and stuff. So I just think, you know, just be aware, like I said, of what you're doing that might be affecting other people. The world doesn't revolve around each tourist. We all revolve around on this world.
Right. At the end of the day, if you're a tourist, you're a guest in someone else's country, state, town, whatever it may be.
Exactly.
Accordingly, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially for people in the travel industry, for people who work the hotels and who are working the restaurants, and that I just seen so much stress occur. And it is a double bind because they're in essence the ambassadors of their country, of their community, of the the hotel or the restaurant, and they'll just have people who feel like they can treat them like garbage. And I just think that's just so disrespectful to somebody else in their life and their quality of life.
I mean, it's amazing that people treat others poorly, especially in the service industry and whatnot. But I have to tell you, when I was looking at clips, I don't have it here to show, but there was a scene where somebody from a hotel ran out and confronted the water pistol folks because that person's job depends on the tourism. And so she was like lecturing all the people shooting the water pistols, like, lay off the tourists, like, this is my job and so forth, which I thought was another interesting aspect to this because
well, and that's the double bind is their job depends on tourism. And at the same time, then they are sometimes berated and beat up and belittled by the actual people that they're there to want to bring to the country. So I think you have to look at that inner stress there of the fear of losing your income and the frustration and disrespect that then can lead to that resentment and anger towards the very people you need. And I think that's one of the big issues that people feel in life, is this dependency crunch, is I feel dependent on you and I fear the loss of you. And so then I can't say how I really feel. So then I keep it in, and it builds and it builds. And then often what happens is people don't take it out in the tourist. They might go home and take it out on their family, or, they kind of kick the dog thing, or take it out on other people in their town or stuff. So I think, again, if we all learn to treat each other with respect, we all knew that we are here for a time as a tourist to enjoy this town, this place, this country, this city, this journey, and therefore not pass around our pain, but contribute to the joy of others, we can really see travel as an equity-based experience. And then what happens if we love a place so much we want to move there? Well, then we want to look at, what's the impact? Is there an impact? What type of place, if I want to live here, do I want to create? Is there a nearby town that I might want to find? Or is there a city that, that I can contribute to? What am I doing to bring, again, more Zen to the place around me, rather than looking for them to serve me and make me feel Zen? That doesn't work. We got to find our Zen inside. And that's a lot about what I teach to people. There's a saying, wherever you go, there you are. And I think that's what I really want people to see is when you see other people and you envy them, then see what you can do to find that within yourself. If you see a culture and envy that culture, then see what you can do to emulate, and not just emulate, but find what you want to create in you to have more of that culture's attitudes, beliefs, behaviors.
Right. So you're almost talking about two different issues here too. One, just the basic tourist who's there breezing in for a week or a few days, maybe on their European vacation. Then the other is the person who maybe is a repeat visitor and decides, I want to move into this place. You're sort of saying, if the former is you, you should be respectful, try to blend in, try to assimilate a little into that. Don't just come in and disrupt, right?
Yeah. And, I also want to bring up something we talked about on one of the Haiti, I think the first Haiti episode, something that's called relief tourism. This is where, you have people who are going as part of retreats and as part of missions to go to disadvantaged countries, and they'll build places for people to live. They'll often might create water resources, or they go to teach. What do people in that culture see when people come there? They often see, because I've talked to people in multiple situations where they've experienced the relief tourism, is they feel that many of the people that go there are doing what they're doing to feel better about themselves. And they often go there and they bring their attitudes and beliefs, especially in some of the mission and educational work. They want to impart their beliefs onto that culture because they believe their culture is better than the others. And we want to recognize that just because a culture doesn't have all the advantages of the United States or the first world, doesn't mean that people in a third world or second world country feel sad. Some of those second, third world countries actually show higher levels of happiness than in some of our first world countries, because they don't feel all those stressors. They don't mind having the life they have, and they live with minimalistically, and they don't have all the potential burdens and responsibilities and mortgage payments and car payments, and have to do, have all these other hurdles often we feel we jump through. So I think, again, we want to be careful of that idea of cultural implantation, I'll call it, in that way, and just be aware. Ask them what their needs are. Ask them how you can help. Don't think that you just know how to help. And that's when I used to do my work in Haiti. I did do assessments of what the people felt like they needed. And I did look at their employment situations and see what I could do when we started teaching about it. And I saw what happened when there were disasters and they had no idea what to do to prepare for a hurricane and develop community mobilization and things. So that's where you want to be aware and mindful of even that idea of relief tourism.
Yeah, and that's very different from leisure tourism. And do you think some of that comes from like a sense of, well, I'm here to help you and do all these things for you. Now, in return, you need to start adopting some of my belief system. Is that kind of the psychology behind that, or?
Absolutely. I think if we go back and look at the conquistadors and many of the Catholic missionaries who came there and said, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to save you. And if you don't do what I want you to do, then I'm going to kill you. And that's literally what happened.
Yeah.
So I think we have to look at some of that idea that, those cultures lived very successfully. And even they had their issues of hierarchy. If you look at Aztecs and Incans and some of those cultures, they were conquering cultures. That's how they amassed their wealth and amassed their fortune. And then somebody else came in and did the same thing. Did that have to happen? No, it didn't have to happen. And I think we have to look at our idea of feeling like we want to conquer. And even now, let's go back to this idea of tourism. When you look at ideas like there was a famous rock in, I think it was out west, and there was a group of Boy Scouts, and this rock was balancing precariously. And there was a couple Boy Scouts, and a couple people who happened to be Boy Scouts, let me say that, who pushed the rock that was balancing off of, and they destroyed this monument to me, to nature, to creation of balance because of their own imbalance. And that's where I think, again, we want to look at in what ways are we destroying the beauty around us because of how we feel or because of our lack of awareness. So again, tourists, just be aware, be mindful of what you're doing and how you're behaving.
Absolutely. All right. So we've got all sorts of tourism. You got the leisure, just vacation tourism. You got the I'm moving to a place because I like it so much here, or maybe make it a sort of second home situation. And then you've got the relief tourism. Got to be mindful in all those situations. Now, Dr. E, do you have any more tourism planned for yourself this year, or was that it?
I think that's the big trip. We'll see. We have family in Florida, so we often are going down to Florida to visit family. But that was the trip.
Yeah, no, that's interesting too in the United States because it's so big and so geographically different from place to place. You can be a tourist and never leave your own country. And,
Oh, and I did remember. I just my nephew invited me to go. He got picked for a barrel pick at Buffalo Trace. So he invited.
What's that?
That they select a barrel that's just for you. So you come with a number. So there's, I think 8 of us are going, and we're going up to Buffalo Trace, and we'll go through the tour and tastings. And then
Buffalo Trace is the brand of whiskey. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bourbon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's bourbon or red, but
yeah.
So then what you do is then you get bottles out of that barrel, and then it's just a really neat situation, opportunity to go for that process. So for that trip, we're going to go meet in Columbus, maybe hit a Buckeyes game, and then drive down for this barrel tasting.
Buffalo Trace is based in Ohio,
Kentucky.
And what I guess Southwest Ohio is right next to Northeast Kentucky. Yep. Is that the geography? Yeah.
Yep. And I'm not sure what town Buffalo Trace is, but you look at the bourbon tours.
Yeah,
that has brought an incredible amount of travel to that whole area that you have where you have all those bourbons. And some, I'm sure in those situations too, some of that's not really wanted travel because of the way people often behave when they drink.
Sure. And there's just been an explosion of those bourbon brands too. And you said Buffalo Trace, I think that's more of a craft bourbon, isn't it? Which there's so many of those nowadays.
There are. Yeah. So let's go ahead and hit some pointers here. So issue tourists want to be aware of is when traveling is first safety and security. So be aware of local safety conditions, political stability, health risks, and hazards. I know, when I go to some places, I needed to check with the health department to see if there was any additional vaccines I might have needed or anything I needed to take. Look on your website, look on I think the Department of State often has travel issues and warnings. Be aware when you get there. Again, ask the people at the places you're staying. Are there places that maybe aren't a good idea for me to travel? Are there should I use taxis or Uber or Lyft? Or, I know in Cabo, there's some rules that some of the places are having against using Uber and Lyft because they want to help the taxi industry still, survive and thrive, hopefully. But things, being aware of that. Cultural sensitivity, as we've talked about. Respect local customs, traditions, dress codes, social norms to avoid offending residents. Again, we've spent most of the time talking about this. I touched up on health precautions, stay updated on vaccines, carry medicines, be aware of food, water, safety issues. I know when I was in Cabo, I ate something somewhere, don't know where, but it didn't agree with my stomach for a day. So make sure you have all the things you need to handle some of those. Our stomachs can be pretty sensitive. So we want to be aware of that and the foods. And don't be careful if you eat something someplace, how you respond if you don't like it. So that's just something to be aware of, how we respond to people of, I didn't like that, it was horrible, or, these are things that people like to eat in that culture. So just, oh, okay, that wasn't for me. Might be a better way to respond. Legal regulations. This is so important because often we go from one country to another and we don't know the laws and rules, whether it's how and where and when you can use a cell phone, or what you might be able to do if you have an issue with somebody, or even be aware of how the legal community is there. In a lot of places people travel, they don't really trust the police because they feel like even those people in law enforcement are going to exploit travelers and say they did something and look for the payoff. So I think there, again, asking about or doing research before you go on a trip to be aware of, is this a safe place to, what do I need to be aware about legal situation? What do I need to be aware about law enforcement and places, like I said, that are safer that I might not be so safe?
Yeah, Dr. E, you had a 90s reference, early 90s reference earlier in this episode with Bill and Ted's. I'm gonna pull one out here too. You're talking about knowing the local laws and regulations. If you remember in the early 90s, I think maybe like 93, 94, there was that American college student who was in what country was he in? Singapore, I think it was, who spit gum on the ground, which in the United States, obviously rude and whatnot, but you're not going to get a severe punishment. And over there, he was convicted to be caned, right? And I think he had to get six lashings with a cane. So
yeah. And then there was the kid in Korea, I believe, who was arrested and, for some, I think it was vandalism or something that, just impulse control issue, were not well thought out, and that created a major incident.
Yeah. So I think it's a great point. Just knowing what over, what in your own country might be kind of, not even slap on the wrist material could be big over there.
Well, and I know, walking on the sidewalks around here, when I was in Cabo, I had to tell some guy, I'm like, dude, you just stepped in gum. I just want you to know, because you're trailing and it wouldn't want you to take it into your hotel room. He's like, oh, thank you so much. But I know in France, they have signs all over saying, ne crachez pas sur le trottoir, which means don't spit in the sidewalk. So yeah, these are all things. Just treat where you go potentially even better than you might treat your own house.
True.
That's a good rule, I think. So environmental impact. We talk about this with people who want to move or be there, but even just take care of your own garbage. And in Japan, they don't have trash cans. You carry your garbage with you and you throw it out whenever you get to your destination. So there aren't many public trash cans. People don't want people to eat while they're walking. So you eat where you buy your food, or you take it into go bag and you eat it at your destination. So be aware of your environmental impact. Avoid littering, respect wildlife, natural sites, all those things, as we talked about with the people who destroyed that balancing rock. Financial awareness, as we look at those issues of financial awareness, keep track of your belongings, understand local currency, payment methods. I think a lot of times Americans, we feel like everybody will take American currency, and they just don't, So be aware, get cash before you go, and or when you get there, or find out where you can get it when you get there, so you're not causing a burden and somebody having to do some exchange thing in their head and then you feeling mad because they can't exchange your money for you. I think that's, and I know I've done that.
I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's even trickier these days with being able to use Apple Pay and so much digital payment methods. It's easy to forget to get some of the you know, paper currency for where you're headed.
And I know one of our favorite restaurants in Cabo, you can pay with credit card. You have to tip in cash.
Yeah.
So that's where, you know, we've forgotten a few times, and you know, unfortunately, those waiters weren't too happy, or servers weren't too happy. But I think that's the thing to understand is be prepared when you're going somewhere. It's your vacation, it's their life, you know. And language barriers, basic phrases, or translation tools. Again, if you have a phone and you're going to a place that might not be necessarily New York City or first world, then they might not have cell phone signals, so you can't easily use Google Translate. So you might want to think about, what are the things that I might want to ask, and can I, you know, what can I do to even download that translator onto my phone so I have access to that to use it. So that's really important, I think, to be mindful of the language issues and the culture you're going to, and at least being willing to try to speak their language, or say, hey, what was that word, you know, that you wanted, that you just gave me, so I can learn learn some of your language. That says a lot to people. And finally, transportation safety. We touched on that. It really is crucial to be aware of transportation safety. And even if somebody's saying they're going to show you somewhere, they're going to, let me show you this store, just politely say, no, thank you. You know, find people who are reputable tour guides, find people who, you know, look at your maps, make sure you don't look like you're just only following a map, because that makes people also targets. So look at your maps before you go places, be aware of landmarks, know the place that you're going to, and again, just be mindful of the situation.
Yeah, and we even heard it in the interview we saw from the one woman about the overcrowding on public transportation. So if you're doing it and you're doing everything you just recommended, just be mindful that it's crowded, and try not to make yourself that much more of a nuisance. Right.
Exactly. So, you know, as we said before, when you're traveling, enjoy your trip and be excellent to each other. And I think that's some of the two best tips that we can give today.
That is sound advice, Dr. E. Indeed, as always, from you.
So until next time,